Hey everyone, my name is Gus Rash, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Ruby's method missing method. So, first things first, what is it? Well, it's a method under the basic object class. Basic object is the parent class of all Ruby classes. In Ruby, since everything is an object, this is kind of at the top of the hierarchy. And basically, method missing is invoked by Ruby automatically when a an object gets a method call that it can't handle. So when an object gets sent a message that it doesn't know how to process, it calls method missing because there's not a method definition for the method in question. So here is the source code in basic object. You can see um, by default method missing takes a int, which is actually an ID for the method name. If you look at the method header down below here, that kind of has some more helpful intuitive names. So the second argument is a array of values. So that's actually an array containing the arguments that that method had. And then the final argument is a object, which is actually a block that that method possibly wanted to invoke on some of those arguments. So moving on, here again we've got the method header and a little description from the documentation talking about when method missing comes into play. And so by default, it's important to note that an error gets raised for method missing. So here is a demonstration of the default behavior for method missing. We opened up IRB and then tried to invoke the length method on 1. And so 1 is a fixed num, and obviously there's no definition for length for fixed num. So we get this no method error showing us the stack and a couple other things. Similar case here with test. Test is a string. We try to invoke the integer division method on it, but obviously that fails as well. So in addition to providing a important default behavior in Ruby, method missing can actually be used in a practical way from a programmer's standpoint. And the way to do that is by overriding it. So here we have an example that was pulled from the Ruby documentation. It's a class called Roman. It's got two methods, and basically it takes Roman numerals and translates them to integers, decimal integers. So you can see the first method there, Roman to int, takes a string. It's not implemented here, but basically it processes the string of Roman numerals and turns that into a integer. And you can see the second method here is actually an override version of method missing. The version takes only one argument, and that's that method ID, that integer argument from the previous slide. And essentially, it converts the ID to the method name and then passes the method name to the Roman2 int method. So as you can see, method missing is critical to this implementation because it allows the user to basically input Roman numerals in the form of arbitrary method calls on a Roman object. So just a really basic implementation here. The Roman to int class, I just implemented it using an array, or a hash rather, excuse me, that takes strings of characters, Roman numerals 1 through 10, and turns them to their integer version, and then outputs the relationship between them. We've got the same method missing definition as the previous slide. And then down at the bottom here, we've got some example interaction, kind of a demonstration of how you could go about using this class. So R is a new Roman object, and then we invoke some methods on R. We invoke I, IV, and X. And obviously you can see the Roman class has not actually implemented any of these methods. There's no explicit I method definition or anything like that. So they're going to be handled by method missing. So you can see on the right here, when we run the program, we get this output that we were expecting. We get I is 1, IV is 4, and X is 10. And that's because when those methods were called on R, it said, oh, there's no I method defined here. Let's give it to method missing, and then method missing in turn passed it on to Roman2int, which created the output. So just kind of a broad view of the uses of method missing. So the first and probably most important is that method missing allows a user to invoke dynamically named methods. So the Roman class was an example of that, because all of those strings of Roman numerals, those are dynamically named methods. You know, they're not explicitly implemented, but yet they still provide us with meaningful information. So method missing is especially useful when you have a large number of potential method calls, meaning that it doesn't make sense to try and go in and write all of those methods or explicit implementations of all of those methods, but maybe you're not actually going to be using all of them, so you especially don't want to waste your time with that. But method missing can also be used to deflect unimplemented methods, either by sending them to a superclass or possibly delegating them back to the object that instantiated the call. You can, just kind of reroute methods as you wish with method missing. And kind of a basic but important facility is to avoid no method errors. So here are my sources. I encourage anyone that's interested in learning more about this to check them out. And thanks for listening.